Okay, I'm going live on YouTube and I'll share the link on Facebook.
Nice.
How's that sound?
That works. You're going to record too?
Oh, yeah. And
yeah, we got folks hopping on now.
Okay, good deal.
Or Dave Valinsky, he doesn't want to turn his camera on.
Okay, folks, welcome to the to the arms room, not the hot zone, the arms room. This is a bi-weekly men's breakfast that we have on Saturday mornings, where it's kind of like TED Talks for men. We bring on interesting speakers that can encourage you and motivate you and inform you. And today we've got a real special guest, Chris Strom. And I'll let Chris Anderson do the introductions here in a second. But I just want to welcome all of you. We're doing this a little bit different. Instead of going live on Facebook, we're going live on YouTube, and then we'll share it on Facebook. So I'm going to go do that right now. Chris?
Yes.
Anderson. We got two Chris's, so I got to be careful who I'm talking to. Chris Anderson, do you mind? Do you know who we've got on the next arms room in 2 weeks?
I don't have
anybody. Are we still
yet.
working on that?
Still working on that. If people want to check back on the Arms Room Facebook page and make sure you give us a like and follow us there too, then we can keep everybody up to date with. But we got a couple of folks that we're working on, but I don't want to really say who they are until we get them confirmed. So
okay, but I know we've got some exciting people coming up for sure. Mm-hmm. And so you guys stay tuned. And again, you can follow us on the Arms Room Facebook page. Let me see where that Arms Room Men's Breakfast. There it is. It's called the Arms Room Men's Breakfast, and I'm sharing the link right now to the live stream on YouTube. And it's actually on my Hot Zone podcast live stream, so don't get too confused. Anyway, very good to be with y'all today. I have been out for a few of these just because my life is getting pretty busy. And I really appreciate Chris Anderson and Dave Valinsky and all the guys who are kind of working on the back end to keep the pipeline full of guests and to keep finding good topics and stuff for us to talk about. So I'm very appreciative to them for keeping this going. And I get a lot of good feedback from the guys who are watching this throughout the week. So even though we might not have 1,000 guys on the Zoom call, that doesn't mean that we're not having a lot of people watch this thing. And I get stuff from people in Japan, from people in Armenia, and all over the place, saying that they've enjoyed the Arms Room Men's Breakfast every other Saturday. So I'll just fill you in a little bit on what I've been doing. But before I do that, let's have Dave. Can you say a prayer for us and just open us up in prayer? Is he here, or did you?
Nope, he's still on. He just needs to unmute.
Okay.
Let me see if I can ask him to unmute himself here.
Let's see here. Gallery. Oh yeah, there's everybody. Okay.
Oh, he said okay,
on?
he's not actually on. He just sent me a text. So.
Oh, okay. How about Glenn Whitledge? Daryl? I just tried to unmute you.
How about that? Is that
good? we're really sad at this.
I feel like someone on the Brady Bunch. I got everybody's picture on there.
The Brady.
Are we good? Can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, let's do this. Almighty God and Heavenly Father, what a privilege it is. What a great opportunity it is to join these men this morning, to delve into your word some, to get some encouraging words. I thank you for your blessing each of these individuals and doing what they do and bringing something cool and unusual at the table and something that we all need to hear. I would just pray for your anointing on this meeting this morning and a great time for all. In your son's name we pray, amen.
Amen. All right. So just to fill you in on what I've been doing, Chris asked me to kind of talk a little bit about it. I've been, since COVID started, when the arms room really got going was like April of last year. And, I was here in Panama locked down. Panama had a very restrictive lockdown. You literally couldn't leave your house. You had to pick one person from your family to go shopping once a week, basically. And that was it. And nobody else could leave. So we were stuck here in the house for 10 weeks until I finally popped smoke and called a humanitarian aid flight to get us out of here and go back to the land of the free and the home of the brave. So we started the arms room then and had a lot of time on our hands. So it really got it going. But then, as travel started going, put it this way, since then I've been in about 12 countries and 31 states. And I've done everything but lick doorknobs and still haven't managed to get the COVID. So I know it's serious, and I know a lot of people have gotten it, and I know people who have died from it, but for some reason I can't seem to get it by trying. If you had seen where I was last week in Tapachula, Mexico, walking through this open air marketplace with just tens of thousands of scruffy migrants who had, just crawled across the border from Guatemala. Nobody's wearing masks, shoulder to shoulder, just no such thing as social distancing. And I thought walking through there, man, if I don't get some deadly disease walking through here, I must be bulletproof. But obviously that's not the case. But for whatever reason, I've been blessed to not have suffered from the COVID just yet. Maybe I will pick it up on this next trip. I head out to Greece and Morocco this week coming up. Maybe there, but it's getting harder and harder to travel. The requirements and the masks and the it's insane. So I find that I'm enjoying it much less than I used to, for sure. And so anyway, pray for me as I travel, if you don't mind. This week, we're going to a couple places that are not real garden spots, like where I normally go. So in the last couple of trips, let's see, I went to Armenia, took a group of about 15 people, and Armenia has really been hurting after the war coming up on a year ago with Azerbaijan. I was there to cover the crisis, cover the war, and then kind of got famous in Armenia because every time I would drop a news package to CBN and they would air it and put it on the internet, then the national television station in Armenia is a very small country, like 3 million people, they would rip it off the internet and air it on national TV. So when I got back from the war zone to the capital city of Yerevan, I was walking around and everybody knew me all of a sudden, and they were wanting autographs, and I got invited to go speak at different places. It was kind of nuts. So leveraging on that, I decided to do a documentary about Armenia. If you don't know about Armenia, you really ought to. As believers, we support Israel, and there's a tight bond between Americans and Israelis, especially since they're kind of the underdog over there in the Middle East, and they're surrounded by enemies who want to kill them. And the Bible is very specific about that. If God will bless those who blesses Israel. But if you stand behind Israel, then you should doubly stand behind Armenia, because Armenia is a devoutly Christian country. And it's, again, surrounded by Muslim enemies that want to wipe them out. They are much, much smaller and much weaker than Israel is. They don't have the backing and support of the United States. They have to make alliances with Russia and Iran to stay alive. If it wasn't for their obeisance to Russia, they wouldn't have made it through this last war, most likely, because they were facing Turkey, which is the 8th largest military on the planet, and Azerbaijan, which also has a much larger military. They had we met on this last trip many families of soldiers who had been killed, and we would ask them, like, tell us a story of what happened to your son. And in many cases, those guys would be drafted, and 2 days later they would be sent to the front, and they would immediately be killed by a drone. They lost almost 5,000 men in just a couple months' time in that conflict, because they were just getting droned to death everywhere they went. They were just getting blown up by Turkish drones. And I've been on the receiving end of those drones, and it's not fun. And the same guys that were shooting at me in Syria 2 years ago were now shooting at the Armenians in Artsakh. So suffice it to say that Armenia needs our prayers, and I would say our support. They are Christian brothers and sisters over there, and there are these very evil regimes looking to wipe them off the face of the earth. They've got an incredible 1700-year history going on with Christianity. It's the oldest Christian nation on the planet, and so we're actually going to do another trip back there in September. So if you want to go, we're opening it up to anybody who wants to go along. Chris, I don't know why you're not signed up yet. You ought to be there, and we're gonna go for the 1-year anniversary of the attack by Azerbaijan, and stand with the Armenians, and then get to tour the country and see some of the history and stuff. And we're keeping the price really low so lots of people can go. So if you want to know more about that, I can put the links down here in the chat box or something, and you guys can sign up. We'd love to have more people go. We've got, I think, 8 people going right now, and we can take up to 15 max. So we still got a few slots open. Glenn, I don't know, you ought to go too, man. Come on, you got more money than all the rest of us put together. Yeah, you definitely ought to do it. You print it in your basement, don't you?
I don't really feel comfortable answering that question on a social media format, but it sounds awesome. I'd love to go. I've traveled just a little bit, but the places I've been to, I thought have been very significant. I've been to Israel.
Well, how many times have I gotten people saying, "Hey, Chuck, gosh, I wish I could go with you sometime. It looks like so much fun, man. If you need somebody to carry your suitcase." Well, I need somebody to carry my suitcase, Glenn. So come on.
I think that would be me. I think every time you've gone somewhere and said, "Hey, I'm going," and I'm like, "Yeah." But
all right, well, let's talk.
I got
we had a real good trip to Armenia. It was so good that my son Nathan, my middle son, said when it was time to leave, he said, "Dad, I'm going to stay here if it's okay with you." And we said, "Okay." And 3 weeks later, he's got a girlfriend, he's got an apartment, and he's thinking about making it permanent and living there forever. So it's a great place. Obviously, Nathan bought it lock, stock, and barrel after just 2 weeks in country. So then came back. We had this big tour with the Gates family that I had to manage for about 3 weeks, and then we had some congressmen show up down here in Panama wanting to see what's going on with the migrants in the Darien Gap. It's a very sad story. There are hundreds and hundreds of migrants. They're called extracontinentals coming through the Darien Gap every day. And the Darien Gap being that 50 or 60 mile wide patch of untrammeled jungle between Colombia and Panama. There's no law, there's no roads, there's just bandits and bugs and rivers that flood every day in there. And there are hundreds and hundreds of people coming through there every day from Colombia on foot. It's about a 6-day walk for most of them. Sometimes they get lost and take twice that. They don't have much in the way of food. And it's really astounding how many people are dying on that trek. I mean, we went to the village in Panama that's the deepest in the jungle that you can go. It's the last civilization in the jungle in Panama, and it's not much in the way of civilization. It's a little Indian village with no running water, no electricity, just thatch roof huts with no walls, and that's the first place that these migrants get to when they make it into Panama after 6 days. And so we went there and watched migrants just come stumbling out of the jungle over, I mean, you know, just all day long, just come and they just look like zombies. Trench foot, like you just couldn't believe. They're hungry, they're dehydrated, half dead. Some of them literally get to the village, lay down and die. There was a pregnant woman that had laid down on the ground that was unresponsive. We couldn't revive her out there. So, I mean, it's really a bad situation. And they're being encouraged to do this simply because we have a new president in the United States that has made it very clear that they're welcome at the U.S. southern border illegally. And they've heard that if you are a, military age male and you show up at the U.S. southern border, that you're going to get put into detention for a couple of months before you get set free with a court date. But if you show up with a kid or a baby, or if you're pregnant, you jump the line, and they won't even put you in detention. They just literally let you go. And so what we're seeing that's different now than what we've seen before in the Darien Gap is that there are just hundreds and hundreds of babies being dragged through there. And I'm talking about 3-month-old babies. I'm talking about women giving birth on the trail in the Darien. And so many of those babies don't make it. The people talk about women getting to the point where they have no food for their baby. They have no milk, and they're 2 days into a 6-day walk, and they know their baby's not going to make it. So they just set it down and walk away. And there are just bodies laying beside the trail, decomposing, and animals coming and eating them at night. And I mean, it's horrible, horrible. There was a baby that died in that village shortly before we got there, and it just got left sitting on a table, its body, until the migrants almost rioted to get the authorities to take it away and do something with it. You see bodies float by in the river on an almost daily basis. And so everybody coming out of that jungle was just saying, there's so many people dying in there. There's so many people dying. As best I can tell, probably at conservatively 1 out of 10 that go into the jungle don't come out the other side. And so we took these congressmen down to see firsthand how bad it is, and to really get an understanding of the knock-on effects of U.S. foreign policy or immigration policy and how it affects Latin America. Panama is a very small country. They can't afford to be spending millions of dollars a month feeding these migrants. The first thing the migrants do when they get to civilization is start complaining that, what is this all we get for food? What do you mean there's no hot showers? What do you mean that they don't even give us pillows? And you're like, hello, you're here illegally. They don't have any reason to provide anything for you. But unfortunately, they've become kind of a political hot potato. There's enough progressives here in Panama because somebody asked me yesterday, well, what's the solution to this? And I said, I mean, the solution, this is my message for us today as men, that when you're a man and you're in charge, your job is to lead your family. You've got to be willing sometimes to do the hard things. You got to be willing to take a stand and to do what's loving, but not comfortable. And so many men let their passivity take over and do what feels good and do what's nice, but not necessarily loving. So in order to avoid the controversy and the conflict in my family, when my daughter comes downstairs to go out with her friends and she's dressed like something that would have got her kicked out of a nightclub 10 years ago, you know, you don't say anything. You don't stand up and go, no, stop. You're not going out looking like that. I'm sorry. Because then I'll have to murder people and I'll go back to jail, and it's just, you know, a big hassle. So, you know, but instead, a lot of men will just go, you know, just kind of not say anything and make the excuse that, well, you got to pick your battles. Well, you do have to pick your battles, but some battles are worth fighting. And when it comes to the migrants coming through Panama, sometimes anything that you do to make it easier for these people to come is going to result in more people coming. And it's not like there's just a wave of people, and once they're past, then it'll be over. They are going to keep coming until everybody in the entire nation of Haiti, everybody in the entire nation of Cuba. Hang on. Somebody's calling me. Everybody in Cuba, everybody in Haiti, everybody in every third world country across the planet is in the United States. That's when it'll stop. And so if we're not willing to take on hundreds and hundreds of millions of people into the United States, which is really untenable, then we've got to do the loving, hard thing to fix the problem. So somebody asked me yesterday what that is. And I said, well, if I was president of Panama, the first thing I would do is say, if you come out of that jungle with a baby or anybody under 18, we will arrest you and put you in prison for child endangerment. And we will take that baby away and we'll give it to somebody who will take care of it. Because it is a crime to drag a 3-month-old through the Darien Gap. And the person I was talking to said, oh, well, you know, I'm never going to advocate for separating families. No, some families need to be separated, I believe. If somebody is abusing their child, I mean, this is no different than if you looked outside your window and your neighbor was out in the street with an iron bar beating his kid with it. You would go out there and you'd put a stop to that if you had any guts. You would do something about that. And it would, people say, well, it'd be very costly for Panama. Well, it would at first, but as soon as you start jailing people for bringing kids through that jungle, it will stop. They will stop bringing them because they don't want to go to jail. They want to go to the United States. So, you know, and I would venture to say that even a Biden administration might be willing to support or you know, help Panama financially if they were to make a stand like that to put a stop to these babies dying in the jungle on a daily basis. But there's not the political will to do that. So what you get instead is the hot potato. They put those migrants right on a bus and they bus them to the Costa Rican border, and the Costa Ricans put them on a bus and they bus them to the Nicaraguan border, and the Nicaraguans put on, et cetera, all the way up to Mexico. And in Mexico, they've got to get a humanitarian visa. That's I think a vestige of the Trump administration and the pressure we put on Mexico to slow things down. And so it takes them several months in Mexico. And so then my last trip after we went to the jungle of Panama was to the Guatemalan border with Mexico. And we went and saw there are just tens and tens of thousands of extracontinental migrants in Tapachula, Mexico, the southernmost city. So much so that there are exclusively Haitian restaurants, exclusively Somali restaurants, exclusively Indian restaurants, exclusively Bangladeshi restaurants that you can walk down the street in downtown Tapachula, and they're just, you know, there's a group of Nepalis and there's a group of, you know, people from Ghana and people from Sri Lanka, and I mean, just all over the world. It's a big crossroads, and they're all waiting for that magic piece of paper that's it's a humanitarian visa to come to the United States. Now, the crazy thing that I found while I was there is that there are quasi-governmental agencies or NGOs who receive US taxpayer dollars that are facilitating the migrants getting to the United States, ergo encouraging migrants to come illegally to the United States. They're using hundreds of millions of dollars of US taxpayer money to facilitate, to assist migrants in coming. And every time you assist one migrant to come, 3 more take his place. So we're paying for this in large part with our tax dollars. It's the most infuriating thing you can imagine. And listen, I live outside the United States, and I am all for freedom of movement. People ought to be able to live where they want to live. But what they shouldn't be able to do is come to the United States, immediately sign up for state programs in multiple states just by gaming the system, and then get a job under the table as well and pay no taxes. I mean, I have examples of people who literally within a couple of months of making it into the United States are making $60,000 a year, and half of that, fully half of that, is free money given to them by various governments and NGO programs. That is what has to stop. And if we were to stop that, then we would decrease the human osmotic pressure that's causing these people to come from all over the world for all the free benefits. I don't mind people coming to our country, and I don't think it should be that difficult to get in. I just think they shouldn't be able to take my taxpayer dollars and live on it. Because when you do that, you encourage every single person. It'd be like saying to all of you, look, guys, all you have to do is get across the border into Canada and we'll give you $1 million a year. Because that's what it's like for these people. And people, when Kamala Harris went to the border, I'm not the border, went to Guatemala back in, last month, April? When was it? She went down to Guatemala, and she said, it was first part of June, I guess. She was there, and she was making this point that it's a often repeated lie you hear, that these people are coming to the United States because they're fleeing persecution and violence in their own country. Well, that's a lie. And it's not a lie that there's violence. It's not to say that there's not violence and even persecution in some countries. I mean, if you're coming from Cameroon, there's a good chance that you're persecuted. If you're coming from Haiti, there's plenty of violence, but you're not being persecuted by your country. To get into the United States on an asylum claim, you have to make the claim that I'm being persecuted by my government systematically. It can't be that my neighbor doesn't like me and threaten my life, or the gangs in my neighborhood are so bad, or the crime is so bad that I had to leave. That's not a valid asylum claim. So if you're coming from a place where the government doesn't persecute you, you have no claim for asylum in the United States. But even if you come from a place like Venezuela, where you could legitimately say, yeah, our government is persecuting us, you have to go through something like 10 other countries to get to our country. And none of those other countries are persecuting you. In many cases, if you say, well, the violence is so bad in my neighborhood in Guatemala, I had to leave. Great, there are lots of other places in Guatemala where the violence isn't so bad. You can stay in your country and just move to a different place. So as I talk to these guys, they make very clear to me, kind of off the record, yeah, I mean, the reason we're coming to the United States is because I can make more money. I can make $15 an hour. Even the people, the Haitians, the Cubans, they've all left Haiti and Cuba many years ago, usually about 4, which tells you how effective Trump's policies were. About 4 years ago, they left their countries, but they didn't come to the United States. They went to Ecuador, Chile, Brazil. They got jobs. They've been making money. They've got jewelry. They've got iPhones. They're not, I mean, they're okay. And they're coming to the United States now because they can make more money in the United States. And much of that money is provided for free from the US taxpayer. So that's what I've been finding. I just came back from Tapachula. We actually have been tracking one particular group of migrants since they were in Colombia, as they trekked through the jungle into the into Central America all the way up, and now they're in Mexico. So we went and met with them again and sort of debriefed them on their trip. And some of the women, this group that we've been tracking, started out about 40 people, and 14 of them died on the trek through the Darien Gap. A couple of those were pregnant women and were washed away in a flood. And then many of the other women that survived were raped, because everyone is robbed when they go through that jungle. Everyone gets robbed. And any woman that's even remotely good looking gets raped. Some of the women in that group have been raped 3 times already. They've been raped in 3 different countries. And the crazy thing is, when you talk to them and you go like, if you had known, like, would you have, and they just sort of go, it's the price of admission. They just sort of accept it. Yeah, I'm going to get raped. That's what I have to do to get to the United States. You know, oh well. They're being raped in front of their husbands, in front of their children. So it's horrific what they go through. And that sort of incalculable human misery that we're seeing is a direct result of US foreign policy, of immigration policy. And so again, anything we do to not discourage, we don't even have to encourage, we just have to not discourage them, is going to result in more and more and more human suffering. And it causes human suffering, not just among the migrants, but among all of the countries along the way who have to support them. So be praying for those people. You know, you can't help but really feel for them when you hear of their tales of suffering, even though they've, you know, crossed illegally into 10 different countries already. I asked one girl, I said, you know, you realize this is illegal what you're doing, right? She's a Haitian girl, and she goes, well, yeah, we have to cross illegally because we want to cross, and the law says we can't. So we, you know, what are we supposed to do? I'm like, how about not cross? How about stay in Ecuador? And she's like, yeah, but we want to go to the United States. So if it's not legal, then we have to break the law. It's like, imagine if everybody had that mindset. Oh, well, you know, that Versace bag in the window, it's too much money and I don't have the money and it's illegal to steal it, but I want it. So sorry. Actually, come to think of it, I guess that is the mindset that we're seeing over and over in the United States these days, with a lot of the protests and riots we're seeing around the country, isn't it? Isn't that true? Okay, well, so not much of a sermon there, but that's a little bit of to catch you up on what's been going on. Does anybody have any questions real quick before we move on?
Actually, Chuck, I wanted to just ask you about, you know, I think a lot of us assume that these migrants don't understand what they're going to get themselves into, but it's interesting that when you were telling us about those women, you know, the women being raped repeatedly, that it just blows my mind away knowing that is going to happen to them, or knowing, you know, that word must also travel backwards about how bad it's getting forwards, but yet people are still willing to, you know, to take that risk, knowing that, again, their children could very well die in a matter of days. And, you know, every state in the United States has agencies set up to deal with child abuse issues, you know, Children Protective Services, but yet people don't want to realize that, yeah, children are separated from families all the time for these very reasons.
Yes.
You know, and I mean, in my line of work, I've got to deal with it all the time. I'm a counselor, and there's times when people come in and tell me about child abuse that I am bound by the law to then report that.
You know, I think what I'm learning as I spend more time with people from countries like Haiti, which, you know, Haiti is the majority of Haiti and Cuba. The majority of the people that are extracontinentals coming up through the Darien Gap are from those 2 countries, with a smattering of people from as far away as Yemen and Eritrea and, you know, like I said, Nepal, Bangladesh, India, everywhere. But the vast majority are Haitians and Cubans. And again, they left Haiti and Cuba a long time ago, so they've been making a life somewhere else. But I think in talking to them and having visited those places, what I can say is that, especially in the case of Haiti, Haiti is a truly uncivilized place. Mm-hmm. There's really nothing. It's all but a failed state. This is not to say anything bad against Haitians. I know many Haitians and love many Haitians. We actually donated to help build a mission house in Haiti. We've been there on mission trips. I've been there many times reporting. So I love Haiti. I love Haitians. But truthfully, Haiti is not a civilized place. The only growth industry in Haiti is kidnapping. And Haitians, by and large, I mean, corporately, not individually, but corporately, if they had to be famous for something, it would be for making bad choices. They say that the average IQ in Haiti is like in the high 70s. Let's just say that they don't have the same affection for babies that people in our country do. Culturally, it's not uncommon for a woman in Haiti to lose a third of the babies that she conceives just because of lack of nutrition, poor sanitation, you name it, right? So, they don't get as attached to their babies as we do. I mean, somebody not long ago found a Haitian woman on the side of the Pan American Highway down there in the Darien Gap. They have to come up with $40 cash to pay for the bus ride to Costa Rica. And this woman was standing by the side of the road trying to sell her baby for $40. So that, I mean, the fact that they would even consider entering the jungle with a 3-month-old baby tells you something about their level of, or their thought process, at least, to say nothing of how civilized they are. But I mean, just their thought process when it comes to the value of that baby's life. And suffice it to say that in Haiti, as many other places, life is already so difficult. They're like 6 days through the jungle with no food. We call that a weekly occurrence in Haiti. I mean, that's like big deal. We can handle that. I have to sleep on the ground. Big deal. I slept on the ground my whole life. They don't have the same expectations we do. So the things that horrify us to them are just everyday life. And it's a sad state of affairs, but it is the truth. It's just the way things are.
Oh, well, Chuck, I just really appreciate you being back on here to give us an update on all of this, because again, we're just hearing these details that I think so many of us aren't aware of. We're aware of the basics of what we're seeing, and of course the dangers of what's going on, Chuck. But my goodness, just putting it in perspective the way that you have and being able to share these details is so important. And of course, we want to get this. I can't wait. I want to get this recording posted. Anybody who's listening to this, please help us get the word out that this is what's really going on, so that we can put pressure on our own government to do the right thing. I think that right there is just an absolute sinful travesty in and of itself. The fact that our government is turning such a I mean, Kamala Harris, 100 days. It's been over 100 days. She hasn't gone to she's just now going down there. I mean, this should have been day number one, that our government should have. But yet again, because, this division we've got in this country right now, nobody wants to give the other side any credit whatsoever for doing the right thing. And who's suffering? It's the people that are desperate enough to take these risks are the ones that are suffering because of our foolishness and our, these governments.
So many of this is such a sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because as people make it into the United States illegally and get jobs under the table and sign up for these programs in different states and such, then a large part of that money goes back to their home country in the form of remittances. And in many cases, it goes to fund the next wave of migrants coming up to the United States. So in that way, we're funding it as well with our tax dollars. But the other thing I noticed is that there are villages. We drove through a couple of villages this last week deep in Chiapas State, southern Mexico. And you notice two things about the village. Number one, it's almost empty because everybody from the village has gone to the US. Number two, it's full of 3,000 or 4,000 square foot mansions. Like all these, you got these little, practically mud huts, thatch roof huts, which is the normal way of life in that village. But these people are going to the States and they're working on a pig farm or something in Kansas, and they're remitting all this money back to their home village and hiring the guy who got deported for a felony to build them a massive mansion
Mhm.
so that they can come home and retire in style.
Yeah.
That's what our tax dollars are paying for, guys.
And you mentioned, Chuck, the kidnapping issue in Haiti too, and how if you're a Haitian that is known to have folks in the United States, that you become a prime target for being kidnapped.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that we've learned is that a tremendous number of those people leave their kids behind, not with relatives necessarily, just with anybody. And there's a big problem with literal slavery in Haiti.
Yeah.
Where people will leave their kids in the care of somebody else, and in exchange for food and a place on the floor to sleep, they work for free. They're laborers in that household. They're servants in the household for free. Wow. And I think that's called slavery.
Yeah, no, it is. It absolutely is. Well, Chuck, thanks again for this update. Very important update. Information we all need to hear. We need to be willing to get the word out to people that this issue goes way beyond what it seems, way beyond what you'll ever hear in the mainstream media. But thanks, Chuck, for that update. I think we better get to Chris Strom here.
So let's introduce Chris. I mean, this guy is a hardcore operator. Former cop, former Marine, and combined those two things into a pretty amazing couple of years in the war zone. We'll let him describe that to you. Chris, thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. I appreciate it very much.
Well, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and about your interesting experiences over downrange, and
Sure.
Tell us about your book.
Sure. I did 20 years in the NYPD. I retired as a sergeant out of the intelligence division. My career within the NYPD was like what you see in movies. I got to do all the crazy things, the car chases, people with guns, counterterrorism investigations. I basically got to live out my fantasies, courtesy of the NYPD. I retired in 2007, and I moved my family to Roanoke. And the thought was I was going to do construction and remodeling, because I had a great career with the NYPD, as I say, but
sorry, I just had, you said construction and remodeling, and I changed the picture, and this is what came up.
Right. Yeah.
Let's hope that wasn't your handiwork there when
No,
you're
sir.
doing construction and remodeling.
No, sir. No, it's actually 9/11. Everybody's familiar with that. Actually, 9/11 is my daughter turned 4 on 9/11. So, wow. For some people it has meaning. I'm sure it has special meaning to people, especially if you lost a loved one. But for me, it's even more poignant, actually. So, I retired and I moved to Roanoke, and thought I was going to do construction, and I was working with somebody that had a different work ethic than mine and a different mindset, and that lasted for about 6 months or so. And I was basically unemployed. I mean, I was getting a pension, thank God, from New York, but I was like, well, what am I going to do? And I was watching what was going on with the war and our soldiers getting killed over there. And I started applying for jobs where I thought maybe I'd be able to use my skill sets from the NYPD and transition them over into Iraq. And I got a call from a recruiter from a company called L3 Communications. And they said, hey, we're looking for people with your background. And, it would require a 1-year commitment in Iraq. And you'd basically be a law enforcement advisor to some colonel, and trying to look at, the problem with the insurgency that was going on over there in terms of the soldiers being killed by IEDs and EFPs. And for people that don't know what an EFP is, that's what stands for an explosive form projectile, made in Iran, shipped into Iraq and other countries around the world. And it is one of the most deadly type of armor-piercing type of weapons ever devised. And the simplicity of it and the complexity of it and the ability to defeat it is pretty much non-existent, depending on the detonation sequence and things like that. So as an example, if you're in, an MRAP, which probably costs about, between the equipment and the communication system, probably close to $400,000. It will literally turn that into an ash heap, one Iranian EFP. So, and everybody that's inside it if they don't die from the explosion or the fire, they'll probably never be the same ever again. It's very deadly and the most prolific killer over in Iraq. So getting back to this project, I get the call from the recruiter and I go to an orientation in Lansdowne, Virginia for a couple of weeks. And they call me and two other people out of the room, and they tell us that the program manager wants to speak to us. So, normally my mind, when I hear something like that, I'm thinking it's probably not good, but because it's almost like akin to going to the principal's office. So like, all right, well, I don't know what I did or what I possibly could have done. I'm running things through my head. I showed up for work on time. I didn't fall asleep in class. Like, what is this all about? And they sit us down and they basically say, look, you guys aren't in trouble, but we have a special project for you. And now instead of just being an advisor, my focus is going to be an interrogator at the point of capture. I'll be doing live combat missions with the Army all over Iraq. And I'll be supported by a bunch of retired special forces operators who will also be part of this team, each with their own individual skill set. And they asked us, it was voluntary. I didn't have to take the position. They said, are you interested? I said, I'm in. And there was an additional 3 months of training, weapons and exploitation and bomb schools and, all different things, driving and first aid and things. And finally, in February of 2008, we were wheels up. Actually, we left the day that the Super Bowl was playing, and Giants actually won the Super Bowl that year, which is kind of interesting. And I got into Iraq, and initially there was some reluctance, as you might imagine, that the Army didn't want to work with us because they were like, well, who are these guys? And, what do they bring to the fight? And, we've been doing fine on our own, which was actually not true. They weren't doing fine on their own. And we finally managed to ingratiate ourselves with a combat team called 122 TST. And it was run by a fellow by the name of Sergeant Dave Peluso, who I actually still keep in touch with to this day. And once we formed this relationship and this bond and this level of trust, I mean, we just crushed these people. So to give you some idea of metrics in terms of what was going on in our area of operation, again, if you look at Iraq, they divided up into different zones, and different brigades and Army and special forces communities are situated almost like precincts within a city. And the zone that we were in, we were experiencing an IED, which could be an Iranian EFP or another improvised explosive device, killing soldiers or maiming soldiers or injuring soldiers every day, sometimes more than one a day. When the program finally got up and running, and the team and the units that we supported, and the one team in particular, 122 TST, which is Tactical Strike Team from the 4th ID, we went 230 consecutive periods without a single event. So we crushed these people, and we rolled up 91 high-value targets, the kind of targets that the special forces community would typically go after, and somehow a bunch of 40-year-old men that had lifelong experience, I was 48 at the time, managed to do what they said couldn't be done.
Well, I think that they ought to have whole brigades of 40-year-old men, because learn how to work smarter, not harder. And we know that warfare is a young man's game without a doubt, but having a bunch of old guys around doesn't hurt, because you go like, I could get hurt doing that. well, send the young guys in. Give me a private.
Right.
So, so what have you learned? What kind of life lessons have you learned spending so much time downrange, spending so much time outside the United States? And I got more questions about the NYPD once you're done with that.
Well, first and foremost, the soldiers, and I call them kids, but because they're kids only because of their age, but they're just beautiful. And when you start working with them and they start to trust you, and they want to have coffee with you or eat with you, and now you're out in an actual war zone where you could be killed, that relationship that I experienced working with these guys and girls will never be replaced. It will never be replicated again in my life. And it was beautiful. And when you work with them and you see that they feel good about themselves in terms of they're making a difference, they're changing the battlefield, they're helping save lives of their own brothers and sisters. I mean, the level of satisfaction and emotion and love is I can't even describe it to you. I mean, the only thing that probably comes close to it is the love that you have for your children and your wife. But that second to that is this relationship that we had with these people. And when they're hurting, you hurt. And when something bad happens to them, you know, you get angry and you get frustrated. You become like a real true family. And the effectiveness of the team, the beautiful job that these kids did, to just give you an example. A lot of the things that the Army does, I'm just going to speak about the Army. I don't want to speak about other services. So I'm going to speak about what I witnessed. Some of the things that they do is like the square peg in a round hole. And you kind of like just say to yourself, why are they keep doing it this way? Why are they doing route clearance, cleaning garbage up off the side of the road, getting killed? It makes no sense. So this program was basically what they wanted to call left the boom. So basically now we're looking at this as a criminal enterprise or organization, and we're going to pick these people off. So now the soldier, instead of just going out on a mission and basically he's providing a security cordon and they're trying to get positive ID on a target, they're actively involved in searching the house, finding the physical evidence, finding the money, finding the bomb components, which again, you know, prior to that, they probably just stood outside the door. Somebody went in there, they grabbed them, they had a guy, they put him on the truck, and then they leave. And there's so much more to police work. There's so much more to combating an insurgency than that, obviously. So now I've said all that to say this, they feel like they were looking at it so, you know, in such a small lens. Now they see the big picture and they realize we are making a difference. And that, again, was coming back to us, and they would come back onto the base and go into the dining facility. And this particular team, 122 TSD, you know, they were like the big dogs now on campus. Like everybody knew what they were doing. And that too was very gratifying to see them getting recognition from their peers, which they deserved, and from their commanding officers and things like that. So it was just an amazing emotional experience and a feeling of self-satisfaction. Like, you ain't going to change the whole world, but you're going to change my little area. And they did, and we did together collectively.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of a good example of the concept that I talk about a lot in my book, Making Men, of engagement. That you cannot just passively expect your life to get better. You can't passively expect the world to get better. The world is going to get worse if you don't take action to do something to fix the problems around you. And you can't fix all the problems, but you can fix the ones that God puts in front of you. And so in this case, you're engaging in that very toxic, very dangerous, very bad environment, and doing something to take out the trash, so to speak, and do it in a way that's incredibly effective. And when you engage like that, it encourages other people to engage, and then it starts this snowball effect, and it becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, you make that change happen by starting small and just letting other people pick it up behind you. It's really cool. So then let's look at the flip side of that. Having been in such ugly places, and I'm thinking specifically of New York right now, and maybe a little bit of Baghdad, but I mean, being a cop is a very difficult job anyway. All the more difficult today because of the ridiculous, this idea that the left has that we should stop crime by taking away all the consequences for crime and take away all the deterrents for crime and making everybody more vulnerable, and that'll make us safer somehow. That's kind of the mindset. It's got to make you pretty jaded. It's got to be difficult for a cop not to get to the point where he sees everybody that's not a cop as the enemy. And how do you maintain a sense of balance? How do you maintain a sense of normalcy and keep yourself from getting to the point where you just pretty much hate everybody? Because I think that would be me if I was a cop.
Well, you know, I'm very partial to New York City. I lived there pretty much all my life. And when I see what's going on there, it's sad and it's very frustrating. And I have a lot of friends that are police officers, some active, some retired, that are still there in New York. And it's like watching a wayward child. You know, you did everything right, and now all of a sudden the new parents come along and the kid is lost. And they have people in leadership positions, both on the political side and actually on the law enforcement side, where they have no
Right.
spine. So I'll give you the perfect example. Back in August of 2019, they started doing this thing called the bucket challenge, where people would film each other grabbing a bucket of water and dumping it over an NYPD police officer's head. Now, I can promise you, when I was a police officer in the NYPD, if somebody dumped a bucket of water on my head, at bare minimum, they were getting arrested. And there was probably a good chance that before they went to the precinct, they might have to make a trip to the emergency room. That's just how it was. Now, fast forward, you have, we've gone from something which is a total disgrace to Black Lives Matter running all over New York City and a 4-star chief taking a knee with them on national TV. He is a disgrace. He should have taken his uniform off that day and resigned. But no, instead, the mayor promoted him to a civilian position, which pays over $200,000. That guy would not be able to come into my kid's kindergarten class. I would not allow him to come into the school because he is the epitome of a disgraceful person, a sellout to the NYPD. So we have not only the bad cops, but then we have a mayor who's fomenting this whole environment. Cops are systemically racist. Let me just tell you something about the NYPD. It's 52% non-white, meaning that pick a nationality. I don't care if it's a Black or a Spanish person, Asian person, Muslim person from an Arab nation. It's all there. Gay, straight. We don't have systemic racism in the NYPD. That's it. I can't even say what it is, but it's an abject lie. It's such nonsense.
Of course it is.
And
yeah, of course it is.
And when you put on the uniform, and I've worn both uniforms. I wore the uniform as a Marine proudly for 4 years, and I wore the NYPD uniform for over 20 years. I didn't see it in any one of those environments. I didn't see it in the Marine Corps. First of all, the Marine Corps is a whole different animal. They are slowly trying to ruin the Marine Corps with all kinds of distraction and noise about transgender, critical race theory, on and on and on. But getting back to the NYPD is the most diverse background of people, and they all get along fine. And quite honestly, even when I arrested people, and I arrested a lot of people in different units, I did street robberies for 4 years, plainclothes. I did anti-crime for 2 years, plainclothes. I did narcotics. I did that for 2 years. I worked in the intelligence division for 5 years, plainclothes. I never had any problem with any ethnic group, period. We all got along fine. In fact, at a precinct level, the community loved us so much that it wasn't uncommon for them to stop by and bring us food or coffee or drinks, or if it was a special holiday, just to come by and say hi. I mean, so this whole narrative is that, cops are systemically racist. Those people need to stop sucking the air out of the room because it's a lie. It's an absolute lie. But they're gaslighting all these people to turn them into victims, and they're not victims. And they then come to just because they say it, it must be so. Therefore, we say it, the police are pulling back now because they're getting all the minority groups of the domestic terrorism of Black Lives Matter and Antifa. Let's call them what they really are. They're under the FBI's own definition, domestic terrorists. They are causing all the problems. They are getting all the airtime on mainstream media. And we have a one-off situation in Minnesota where we got to burn down every major city and turn it into a massive defunding of police nationally, when everybody, myself included, thinks what that person did was horrible. He should be punished, and he should go to jail. But for the actions of one person, we're going to gaslight the whole country and burn it down and loot in stores, raise the dollar amount. I think in New York City, it's $1,500. So basically what you have is these roving bands of kids walking into a store with a shopping cart or a trash bag and just ransacking the store, and the police can't do anything because it doesn't reach the dollar amount of $1,500 where you could even arrest them. Now, I don't want to get too off track, but I'm emotional.
I wish you'd tell us how you really feel about this.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, this is great.
They did away just recently, very recently. They had bail reform and all this other stuff. They just recently did away with what they call fare beating, which for some people that don't live in a major city, that's basically jumping in the turnstile or getting on a train without paying your fare. Now, again, because that is what they consider a minor violation. But believe it or not, more arrests for guns in New York City were made by people jumping the turnstile, because now you have probable cause to stop this person. He's committed a crime, although it's a very low level crime, and probably would just get a ticket. But more guns were found with that practice, second to only street crime and anti-crime. So they've done away with anti-crime, they've done away with street crime, and now they've done away with the final leg in the three-legged chair of minor violations. So how is anybody going to be able to go to New York City? The amount of guns, the proliferation of violence in the subways and on the streets, it's a daily scene of how much worse can it get? Old people just being punched on the side of the head for no reason. Again, being filmed from their friends thinking that's funny. Robbed in broad daylight, shot in broad daylight. So this government that we have right now, both on the national level in Washington, D.C., which is also gaslighting the whole country, and what's going on in New York City, those people are disgraceful. And there's going to be a price to pay for this. But where it's all going to end, I don't know. Because now they're having another election for mayor of New York City, and it looks like they're going to reelect a guy who is a Democrat and also a former police officer. And who knows where that's all going to go? Is the city going to get better or worse? Who knows? It's really impossible.
Well, you know, I think anybody with an IQ more than an avocado knows that you get more of what you subsidize and less of what you penalize. And this is a perfect example of that. If you want to see what that looks like, all you have to do is look at any major city in America today, New York being chief among those. So thank you, Chris, for coming on and for giving us that kind of interesting and kind of horrifying look into the inner workings of what's going on in New York right now, and even more so, giving us an uplifting story about your experience in helping make America safer overseas. Appreciate what you do, and we hope people will get your book. I'm going to put up the picture of that again real quick, so you guys can get it. It's called Brooklyn to Baghdad, NYPD intelligence cop fights for terror in Iraq. Is it out in Japanese yet? Because apparently there's a lot of people from Japan watching live right now. So are you have any plans to translate it into Japanese?
You know, I'd have to ask my publisher that. I guess really it would depend on demand. Like right now, it's still in its first printing. So I would have to say now it is not, but I can certainly make an inquiry and get back to you on that, Chuck.
I have a feeling there's a lot of pictures in there so that Marines can read it. Maybe that'll work.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, there are some pictures. Yeah. So.
All right, good. Well, God bless you. Thank you very much. Tom Coffin, can you unmute your mic? Is he still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Great. It's good to see you, Tom. Would you pray for us as we leave today?
Yeah, boy, it's a little hard to know how to pray. I mean, really, honestly, it's just kind of overwhelming. But so I think I really need to say right now that Father, even though what we hear seems overwhelming, you are the overwhelmer. You are the one who is infinite, who is omnipotent. And Father, we bow our knee to you and we trust you. And so, Father, would you lead us into to be brave and courageous influencers, and to really speak truth, to do it with a loving heart, but nevertheless to speak strongly. Father, well, your word predicts it's going to get worse, Father, in our sphere of influence. May we do all we can to rescue as many as we can. And thanks for these men that have spoken this morning and how you've spoken through them. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Tom's right. Things will continue to get worse. As men, it's important that we understand what's going on in the world, but it's also important that we don't lose hope, because our job is to be the heroic figure in this story, in our story, in God's story. God will accomplish all these things without us, but he wants to include us. And our job is to make the world a little bit safer, a little bit better everywhere we go. So let's try to do that this week. Thank you for being a part of the Arms Room. I hope that you'll come back in 2 weeks. We'll have more good guests for you. And if you have questions, or if you're interested in going to Armenia, just send me an email. My name, Chuck Holton at gmail.com is the email address, chuckholton at gmail.com. And I will try to put in the comments on the YouTube video that'll be out there after this is over. I'll try to put a link to where you can sign up to go on that trip. We'd love to see you. All right. Thanks for being a part of the Arms Room, Chris and everybody else. Thanks for being here with us today. We'll see you again next time. Take care.